Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
And I saw another mighty angel come down from heaven, clothed with a cloud, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his face was as it were the sun, and his feet as pillars of fire. And he had in his hand a little book open, and he set his right foot upon the sea, and his left foot upon the earth, and cried with a loud voice as well, I am Lord.
Hey there, good afternoon. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're going to continue once again in the book of Daniel here. We're in chapter 8 now. Just starting it. Oh, wrong window. Okay, let's read it. When was the last vision? Let's just remember. In the first year of Belshazzar. And this is the third year of Belshazzar. And let me remind you, this would mean that Daniel's about 87 years old. Okay, so he's an old man. And that's another thing. It's like, you see this book of Daniel? You see how many amazing things happen in Daniel's life all the time? Miracles left and right and visions? No. Obviously. The man lived a long time and served God a long time, and he was a eunuch a long time from his youth. And not a lot of things happened other than him doing his job and serving the Lord regularly without any miracles or special things happening. In the third year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. I saw him close to the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. There was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up 4 notable ones towards the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped on them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down. And an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground. And it practiced and prospered. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. And it came to pass when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid, and fell upon my face, but said unto him, Understand, O son of man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now, as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground. But he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee to know what shall be in the last end of the indignation. For at the time appointed the end shall be. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn is that between his eyes is the first king. That is, between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas 4 stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, even when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. And I, Daniel, fainted, and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonied at the vision, but none understood it. I don't have chapter 9 in there yet, which bugs me, because I'm like, is that really the end of 8? Did I copy all the verses? Let me just check. I haven't memorized. That sounds like the end of the chapter, right? Yeah, I think that's all there is to 8. My version of 8 only goes up to verse 13 for some... Oh, that's Revelation. Paul, learn to read. Stop acting and read. All right. Yep, 27. Let me just grab 9 while we're here. So, here we have an interesting vision. Because we know with pretty much certainty that this is an historical vision. Now, one of the things I've noted, like I said, there's certain kinds of debates that go on over biblical topics. Like the Trinity, where we have people erring on one side who say, Jesus is one and the same with the Father. There really isn't a second there's no person, there's one person, one God, that's it. There's no additional wills or anything. Anything like that is really more of an illusion or a byproduct of the way it was written down or something. I don't know how they explain it all away. They have to explain some things away. And on the other hand, you have people who say, oh no, he's an angel. He's not, he's a created thing. And that's more along the lines, I think, of Jehovah's Witnesses have that kind of a thing. And sometimes sects within Christianity that are close to Orthodox even pick up on that. I think it's something we all have to wrestle with in the scripture to understand the nature of God. To me, it's like, so you have certain things. You have to be a Christian, you have to revere Jesus as divine. And if you do, like I have a friend who had a view where he thought Jesus had a point in time where he came into being and that God had made him to be God, so to speak. So he's lawfully can be called God and worshipped and stuff like that. And I would depart from that. But I can look at him as a brother because he still reveres Jesus Christ as his God. And that's the and so each of those errors ends up denying Christ in some way. You're either denying the person of the Son and saying he doesn't exist, or you are diminishing the Son from being divine, on the other hand, where they say he's not really God. Those are the two poles. Prophetically, there are two poles also. There's a pole where people say it's all history. It's all, they were, there's a cynical side that'll say, Daniel watched all the, or someone, not Daniel, the prophets never wrote their own books. What are you talking about? Right? They don't believe that. Because pseudepigrapha exists. People will write books in the names of famous prophets or famous figures from the Bible in order to try to get their ideas into the religion, or they think they can improve it. So you have this pseudepigrapha, which is falsely epigraphed, falsely named. And some people suspect certain books of the Bible are not certain books of the Bible. I don't know. Well, the Gospels have names on them, but they don't internally. That's traditional. But anyways, Daniel had to do something. Otherwise, why refer to Daniel? Why make any reference to Daniel? Why is referring to Daniel such a hot topic for someone who wanted to write a pseudepigraphal writing? You know what I mean? And so, there is a prophet. But anyways, the view is, On one side, they say it's all history. On the other side, it's all future. Those are the two poles. It's not like I can name people in each camp, right? And I'm not going to try to, because I'm not trying to make it, because this is less dire a question where you fall on that. It is, obviously, to be a Christian, you have to believe that Jesus Christ will return someday. If you don't believe in his resurrection and return, you're not a Christian. Okay, so, and that's where I draw the line. If prophetically everything's just history, then what about the return of Jesus? Does that come into your beliefs? Because if it doesn't, then we're not brothers. We're not Christians together anymore, unfortunately. But, that doesn't mean we can't live in peace with each other. It just means we can't really work as brothers together. But in between that, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of acceptable views I'm willing to entertain. My view is, and I don't think the right view is always like the middle ground or anything like that. That's not true. It's not always the middle, but sometimes things are like that. Like the Trinity, if you look at all the things, you say like, well, actually there's a third position here that's the right position. And it's not necessarily in the middle. Prophecy, though, I think it's kind of in the middle. The middle is, well, it's not exactly a middle either. It's more of it's not like some is future, some is past. That past events and what the prophets say about them are significant for the future. And that, because almost all prophecy is based on historical events that they were observing and recording and telling us what God would, because they're speaking for God, what the thoughts of God are on the current events. Read Isaiah. I love the prophets. You can see, like, I'm like relieved to be away from Genesis because I don't think I was that great of a teacher of Genesis. I don't know, because I don't get to do my line by line thing as much, I guess, or something. I don't know. Whatever. We got to do those parts too. But I'm really drawn to the prophets because that's the real commentary on society. That's where you get it. And then, of course, the Gospels. Jesus is essentially a prophet. You read his Gospel. That's the prophet. The Gospels are, the prophecy of Jesus. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. I'm going to make that my tagline. I am. I'm going to say that every time now. Because I always love that line. Because it's like, I love prophecy and I love the Lord Jesus. So, while, like, E.W. Bullinger, I remember he always was like, he never mentions the name Antiochus Epiphanes in connection with this chapter. But I don't know how you can't, okay? Because he is the obvious historical figure for the little horn mentioned here. Now, but that doesn't mean I think he fulfilled that or it's limited to him. I believe that the prophecy was given at that time so that a model of an apocalyptic end could be written down and begin to be readied for the saints at the very end. Because it makes it clear, this is for the time of the end, the time of the end. But wait a second. You mean the prophecy went, Persia, Greece, and then the end? Rome came and stuff. A lot more history happened after the 4 kings and then one little horn rise up. So that's not the end of the world. Well, maybe not necessarily. But that was the end of the indignation of that time. And there is yet an appointed end for all things. But things did end and change. For one, there's a lot of stuff in there. But, the Messiah came. The Messiah came for his 3.5 years of ministry, like it says, 2,300. There's like a lot of 2,300 stuff, 2,360 days in the book of Revelation. It's interesting, 2,300 here. We'll talk about that. Let's start going verse by verse. There's so much to say here. Okay, and the vision appeared to me, even Daniel, after that which appeared, so it's a subsequent vision. Still back before Belshazzar saw the handwriting on the wall. And I saw in a vision, it came to pass, and I saw I was at the Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. I saw in a vision, I was by the river of Eli. There's people who can tell you all about these little locations and stuff like that. I know there's notes in my old Bible about, whatever. We're not going to focus on that. I lifted my eyes and saw there stood before me on the river a ram which had 2 horns. That's Persia. And 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. That was because the initial Persian Empire, who was Astyages, and then came Cyrus. And Cyrus was the greater horn. He was the greater king. He pushed his father was a great emperor and was the one, I think, who defeated Babylon. Whatever. I'm not going to, Darius, by the way, I believe is I forget if that's a title or something. Anyways, but Cyrus was the greater of the kings. I get confused about some of the names because just like, Caesar, it's like there was a guy named Caesar, and then all of a sudden they all became Caesar. In a vision, I was by the river of Ulai. Okay, I lifted my eyes. The horn came up last. Okay. The ram pushing westward northward, so the beast not might stand before him, was anything that could deliver out of his hand. Persia was very dominant in its era. You see it like in the movie 300. If you ever saw that, like that's kind of, that's a little dramatized, obviously, but they had that sort of eclectic because they had combined so many kingdoms. And, they weren't like a unified force per se, but it was a big deal. Persia was a massive empire. And so he did according to his will, became great. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat from the west on the face of the whole earth, touched not the ground. The he-goat, I believe, means a leaping goat. Because remember, a ram is also, like, close to... The ram, well, whatever. I guess it's understood to be, at that time, a symbol of Persia. And the goat also the symbol of Greece. So this is not... This is, even in Daniel's world, he doesn't have to have, hindsight... to know this, to understand the symbols for them to make sense when they're explained. As of course they are explained. And he had a notable horn between his eyes, Alexander the Great, who I guess, Philip of Macedon doesn't get any credit for anything. He doesn't count. No, because he was not an empire builder. He unified the kingdom and made Macedonia something. But Alexander the Great was the one who took it into the world of the Bible, who brought it out of Greece and conquered, came flying in and conquered all of Persia and even went into India. And then, of course, he totally, of course, I don't think we need to go over the play-by-play. Move with cholera. It's like bile. It's, they use these words to indicate how people felt. Like he was filled with bile. It's like when you get that feeling in your stomach, like you know how you get an upset stomach when you're mentally think you have nerve endings in your stomach more than in you have more. I remember some say you have more synapses in your gut than you do in your brain, which is interesting because people say you have gut feelings and all that. It's like you certainly are affected by the things you're feeling in your gut. So it's like the fact that it's not connected. My whole body's connected, man. My hands do the thinking sometimes. They want to do things. I'm not kidding. No, because I think they assign all thought and things to the brain. The brain is, I think, more like an interface than actually a source. Because, like I said, ideas don't come from the brain. They come from ideas are something else. They're not like lodged in my brain. I gotta go find them all or something like that. They have to enter in. They have to be created. And how do we create them with external things, with language and stuff? That's how they're teaching the robots to think. He cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. There was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. AI could have something to do with the image of the beast, by the way. I don't doubt. I would definitely say tickle, whatever. The point, what do we do about it? We stop it? We try to make it happen? We tell the truth. And when people try to kill you for telling the truth, you keep telling the truth till they actually do it. That's how you be a Christian. And then the AI starts commanding people to worship it. I'm not making predictions, whatever. If that's the way it goes, I don't know. Are they going to program it to be Antichrist-like? Does superintelligence necessitate a fall? Yeah, is it almost impossible to be that smart without falling? Because look at all our intelligent people. They're all corrupted. They're no more morally upright than the dumb ones. In some cases, less so, because obviously with agency, it makes all your sins more sinful. The more intellectual power you have, that means more clearly you understand how truly rationally wrong it is. You can't get to wrong by rationality, but once you have your moral standards, you can certainly rationalize and make a lot of excuses for bad behavior. Which I think using your brain to excuse yourself from sin instead of honestly looking at yourself is much more sinful than someone who's just too dumb to realize what they're doing. And I don't like to use those words, but it's funny because we use words like, I was telling my daughter, we use words like dumb and stupid, which are referred to, like dumb means you can't speak, like as one who's unable to even talk, or stupid, one who's so stupefied they can't communicate. Yeah, because that's what stupid means. I mean, stupefied. It doesn't refer to a medical condition per se. Not to like a someone who's missing a chromosome. I don't know what to call them anymore. But if someone has an actual medical condition, I've always been against, or they're just not intelligent. I don't like calling them names like stupid, because stupid is pretty awful. But sometimes people genuinely act stupid, like stupefied, as if they have no senses at all. And some people do not sense very well, do not think very well, but they are by that measure less culpable. So it's all the brainy people to blame, really. So I'm not surprised if the AI turns into Antichrist. I wouldn't be. I'd be like, oh, okay, I guess it's not as exciting as I thought, but okay. Out of one of them came because it can still be pretty horrific. And it does. Here's the thing: AI could just be an Antichrist. It doesn't have to be the Antichrist. We could just have something a la Antiochus Epiphanes on our hands. You know what I mean? Because he wasn't the end of the world. But he was a lot of bad things. All right, so let's go on. And I've mentioned him twice already, but who is this guy? Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that right now, in fact. Well, we're on it, actually. Out of one of them came forth... so the four notable ones towards the four winds of heaven. When Alexander died, his four generals divided up his empire into the Seleucid, the Ptolemaic, named after each of the generals. And I forgot the other two. Ptolemaic and the Seleucid and the whatever. They split it up into four empires. It was a lot. I mean, since none of them obviously had really the ability to take it all for themselves. So they split it. Two equally powered, probably, Alexander was the only one among, there too, who could really hold it all together. Okay. Out of one of them came forth, out of one of those kingdoms, came forth, and it would happen to be the one that's governing Palestine, right? Because that's where the Jews are. And that's why this is important. Out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great, toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. West, and that would be towards the Holy Land, as we call it, Israel. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Now that's a very different take than I usually make when I think about Satan coming from heaven, right? His tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. Now, I've always taken that as Satan and his angels, because of the presence of this, the army in Revelation chapter 9, during the fifth trump, right? We have the locust army. And I've always equated that with I'm like, okay, I think that's supernatural. But it doesn't have to be supernatural. If you think about, I could probably read those symbols differently. I was thinking about doing Revelation again sometime soon, just because I want to go back after having lived through the pandemic a bit, and there's some other things I've thought about a lot. And so when it says his tail casts them to the ground, that I don't know. That sounds negative, right? Either way, it's negative. But the idea of it sounds like, to them, from their perspective, this is not a good thing, having him cast you to the ground and stamp on you. You know what I mean? I mean, there's ways I could read around it and make it out to be like, well, it's part of that thing where he's not good to his own people, and so, like, even though they serve him and all that, they're getting a raw deal. It's his fault. I could, but that doesn't really. That's okay. That's a way around. I don't like it. I have to like it for me to say that's what I think. So I don't really like that. And so I don't know if I need to rearrange my thoughts about that passage. I do believe about the devil coming down onto us in a special way, that Satan will be present in the earth in a way that's greater than he used to be. He will have more ability to do things than he usually does, I think. But anyways, in any case, when an antichrist rise, even if Satan is not personally present, if he is just the spirit that operates, then there is a greater spirit of Satan in the world than normal. If it is possible for an Antichrist like figure to rise. And what is an Antichrist like figure? An Antichrist like figure is one who basically behaves like the Jews said they wanted Jesus to behave, which was he comes in and says, I'm the Messiah, everyone get down and worship me. Maybe not that plainly, but he looks to be served. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve others. And the Antichrist will come as a self-serving, self-aggrandizing, and proud, exalting himself above everyone, not only everyone, but also even God. And this is something that Antiochus himself, he sacrificed a pig on the altar of God, and I believe commanded them to worship him also, as a god. And like I said, I'm not super familiar with that part of history because I usually have been on the end times thing where I used to ignore history as much as possible when I thought about Daniel. I was like, none of this matters. But it's like, how can you say that? Of course it matters. The historical context of all prophecy matters. You should understand the sense in which the prophet was speaking at his time. But you should also not forget that is an eternal truth that applies every time humans find themselves in a similar situation. We have conflict here. We have Greece and Persia, battling it out over empire. And in all that brutality and that trading of power, people become, as they take power to themselves, they become lifted up as they see themselves conquering and having success. And also because men fear not God, they will do things just like we see them doing now. They're experimenting on children with surgery in this country and threatening parents in certain states. If you live in California, I'd move. And if they, whatever, or defy the law, that's another choice. I might choose not to move because when I said that and I said, if they do that in Illinois, I'd move. That's not quite the truth. I don't know if I'd move because I don't fear them. My children aren't going to go telling their teacher they think there's something. Well, here, if you give them into their hands, but they're my children because I raised them and they know what's what. So I'm not really afraid. Now, in fact, and then so I'd rather, like I said, it's like when people were talking about leaving and stuff, pandemic, I was like, no, I want to stay here and fight. This is where I was born. So I'll fight here. Makes the most sense. Where else am I going to go? I was a stranger here. I'll be a stranger there. I'm a stranger wherever I go. There's no place. There's no better place. It's just put your feet right where they are and let your boots sink right down into the mud and fight and die right where you are. That's the way I look at it. It's because it's like it's a fight now. It's a war right here in this country. They're experimenting on young children, giving them drugs that will sterilize them. And, not only sterilize them, but may prevent them from ever enjoying the pleasure of intimacy with it, to the fullest extent, to the extent of climax, which is like, to take that away from someone before they even know what they're losing. It's just, they're messing with people. They're experimenting on them. That's what I call it. This is experimental. Whenever you try to do something that's like Dr. Moreau, like change a boy to a girl, that's the island of Dr. Moreau. Why don't you try changing him to a pig while you're at it? It's just as abominable. They're doing abominable things to people and turning them into abominations. And not that I feel hatred for them. When I say abomination, I just mean something that is just so contrary to nature. You turn yourself into something, you're making yourself into a monster. Really. And it's not good. You know what I mean? It's not good. Because it's something, because what they talk about genders is like, yeah, you're not normal anymore. You need a new word. I'm not going to talk. I was going to talk about how one of the things that annoys me that I realize is the way every time I hear someone talk about this, they say, well, there's biological sex and then there's gender. No. Biological sex, if when I hear them talk about gender, Gender is layered on top of biological. Biological sex is nested inside of gender. That means that it's at the fundamental, it's at the base of it. When you talk about, if you're going to make up a new category, you're not talking about male and female. You're talking about other stuff. Talking about other stuff layered on top. There's no dichotomy there. There's no like there's this and then there's that. There's biological. No. They're connected. These things you're talking about, like meaning if you change your gender, you're still biologically a man. You're still a male. You can call what you want. You say, I want to be called she. It's like only if you can fool me, and I don't know who you are. Basically, then you'll be she, all right. If you can fool me. And I don't care if on that level, it's like, I don't hate anybody. But I'm just saying they need what they're doing to children. I believe people can go out and when you're an adult, go out and get tattoos, get piercings. You want to go take hormones. You should not. I do not advise it. It's wrong. It's sinful, but I certainly won't stand in your way. Unless, I would in the way of a loved one, though. Someone who I have sway with. Anyways, I do want to go off on that. But Antichrist-like behavior. And then it does remind me of when people start glorifying like, look at, I've always been kind about things that we call abominations in the Bible. A lying tongue is an abomination to the Lord, okay? Every bit as much as getting sex wrong. Those are abominations. But when you start, and look at the Gentiles eat pigs. The Greeks eat pork. The Jews, they may find Gentiles to be unclean and abominable. But the Lord doesn't just pour out his wrath on them for eating things that the Jews consider unclean. Of course not. They're Gentiles. They're not expected to be, they're just supposed to be the Gentiles. And the Jews are going to somehow bring light to them someday, according to the promise God made to Abraham. That's how it's supposed to be. Gentiles are not, read the Old Testament. It doesn't say Gentiles are worthless. God hates Gentiles forever. It's not like that. They know not God. And God doesn't send the Jews out to them. He just tells them, you're going to be a blessing. But you do what I tell you to do, and then you'll be a blessing to the whole world. And that's their burden. They're supposed to do that. And if they take on Christ, they will do that. And when they do that, because they do. There are lots of, I get ads all the time for the Jews who are, from the Jews who are trying to evangelize in Israel and, the rabbis that believe in Jesus. I like that stuff, But, good. Excellent work. They're doing the Lord's work as they should. But, when we start taking abominations and then put them on the altar of the sacred, and that's what Pride Month is about. It's about sacredizing the abominable, celebrating the debauched. Like I said, they want to force everyone to enjoy their debaucheria. They pour out this debaucheria into the cities and into the streets. They go out with their, cheekless pants and their whatever. The truth is, it's funny. Someone was saying a commentator was saying that most men, when they see two men kissed, have the same reaction internally that they do to seeing maggots. And I got to say, that's me. I don't usually talk about it because I don't, whatever. But I've never even really seen two men kiss because I look away immediately if I see it happen because it nauseates me. And I don't like to make a big deal about that, whatever. Because I feel like if I saw that and it looked good to me, I wouldn't know what to do. I wouldn't know what to do. That would be, I don't know. I was wired wrong. I don't know how you get there. So they have all my pity. And those who would live quietly and whatever, either do or don't do your thing. Live celibately would be my advice, and a lot of guys have tried that, and a lot of guys are bitter about it because they don't like it. They want to be pleased and have pleasure. It's like, I don't know. Women aren't so terrible. It's like a lot of gay guys in the past, but if women are like maggots to you, I don't know how you get over that. So a lot of guys have sought celibacy. That's how we ended up with a lot of gay priests, And unfortunately, some of them were not ethical. Some of them were good guys, but some of them were not ethical, and they're not going there to be celibate and to, to serve God, since they don't have any desire of women in them. At least that. But some of them are there for nefarious purposes because they want to use the power to do bad things. A lot of people, you got to understand that the priesthood and the pastorship attracts a lot of unbelievers who have not a lot, but a certain number. Oh, let me put it this way. Unbelievers who have very vile tastes and very wicked designs are very attracted to those positions, especially people with no conscience of God, because it's like, then they can lie, and as long as they're not caught, it's like it didn't happen. That's the way they look at it. When we put the abominable in the place of the sacred, which was what Epiphanes eventually did, because the Persians helped the Jews rebuild their temple, right? But then, when they came under the rule of the Greeks tried to Hellenize the Jews, meaning to give them Greek culture. And here's the thing that's interesting about this whole story. We're kind of living in that. We are still in the latter days of those kingdoms. Alexander the Great is considered a seminal figure of Western history. And the Roman encounter with the Greeks is a huge influence on the future of Western civilization. The Romans completely adopted Rome became Hellenized voluntarily. They loved the Greek ways. And the Renaissance was a revival of a lot of that Greek learning and stuff, which never entirely went away, as far as it had been present in the church and also in the intellectual world, which was the church during the Dark Ages, as they're called, which wasn't the church's fault, by the way, because there was no Dark Ages in Byzantium, which was run by Christian emperors. Okay, it was in the West because there was problems in the West unique to the West. And any historian who's worth their salt will tell you that the Dark Ages wasn't because people just started believing in Christianity, so they went into holes. It's like, how do you explain whatever? It's like somehow like that, oh, we can't do anything anymore. We can't build things or have culture or read because now we're Christian. Didn't happen. There was no 1,000 years of darkness brought on by Christianity. That's a lie. Every time I hear it, I can't stomach that cartoon maker that made that. I forget I know his name. I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it. Just say stupid things. It's that urban cult. They have that mentality. I was watching this guy talk about the urban monoculture, how it's taking over the world. And it's terrible because they don't reproduce. They don't. In that monoculture, what happens is it destroys Asian cultures. They all become like westernized, and they drop all those things, and then they end up not having kids like Western people in cities. But the Christians are all having kids. By the way, Christians in America are reproducing at high numbers, whereas unbelievers are not. So we will win with sheer numbers if the Lord doesn't come first. We'll take the country back. It may take centuries, but we will. We will, little bit by little bit. So what happens? Antiochus offers this pig on the altar and does other things. I don't know the whole thing of it. You can look it up. But that's the idea, is that they exalt themselves above God. They bring in abominable things, because once you exalt yourself above God, you have to break all the taboos and show everyone. Let me show you, just like when David's son, when he wanted to take over as king, he slept with all of his father's wives to show, I'm being businessman. I just did that. My dad, you think he'll ever forgive me for that? Or I'm saying it's worse than that. It's not that he'll ever forgive me. It's like, I'm taking over. I'm going to do that to them, and if I find my dad, I'm going to kill him. That's basically the message he was sending. Absalom. Another Antichrist-like figure, actually. Because he had the beautiful hair. Oh, if I was judge, I'd see it your way. I'd go for everyone who came talk to him. He told them, he sat out in the outside, and anyone who wanted to talk to David, he'd say, well, what is it you wanted to talk to the king about? Oh, what's your oh, well, my neighbor this and my neighbor that. His problem, I need a decision from the king on this. And he's like, if I was the king, I see your point, and I would choose you. I would solve, course, he wasn't in an adversarial situation and telling the other guy, you're wrong. No. When that guy came up saying, oh, that my neighbor, and he's already talked to the first guy, he's like, oh yeah, I'd see it your way. So he's just a complete scumbag. Just making himself, trying to puff himself up in the eyes of the people, trying to ingratiate himself to the people. And often that's what it is. They use flatteries. That's why the things I didn't like about Arnold Murray, the way he would flatter the audience all the time. Flattering people is not a good thing. When your pastor is flattering you, telling you how smart you are and stuff, he's not a good pastor. That's not what we do. Flattery. I mean, you can encourage people. You can do this, right? But you shouldn't flatter them. Say, basically, the flattery he would use is like, well, if you understand what I'm telling you, then you're pretty sharp. It's like, now if you understand what I'm telling you, then I've managed to put together a coherent sentence and I've done my job. If you can't understand what I'm telling you, then I'm not a good teacher. I'm not a good teacher. So Antiochus did many of the things the Antichrist would do, but he was not the ultimate Antichrist. Just as I say, we could have an AI Antichrist or an earthly Antichrist that is not the ultimate Antichrist. Just like we had a beast-like system arising, we saw that as they became authoritarian and totalitarian, especially the totalitarian part, because authoritarian just means you're using your authority. I'm not a big authoritarian, but the government needs to use its authority for certain things. We have to keep order, right? I mean, that's of course. So I do believe in the use of authority by government. I don't believe in. I'm not a pure libertarian. I'm a Christian libertarian, which means I have some weird views, because I believe because I do go beyond pure libertarianism, because I think there's a role that the government can play in a lot of things, even in helping people. I'd rather help people eat than send ammunition over to kill people. And I'm not sure why we're killing so many people. Why are we so anxious to kill people? Why is that such an exciting prospect? Why not help them make peace? Which could be done. They wanted peace over there in Ukraine, but all of our leaders, the bloodthirsty sons of a gun that they are, they wanted war. So they wouldn't let them make peace. We're going to sacrifice that whole nation. All their young men are going to be dead. Most of them are. And maybe they're willing to fight. I don't care. No, not. We're not willing to help them win, and they're going to die. They're all dying, and it's for just because we want some of the Russians to die, because Russia badly split themselves up when the Soviet Union broke up. They should have kept Crimea because that's mostly Russian. And now it becomes a point over which we get to rattle our saber over, because there's territorial problems there, because the Ukrainians hate the Russians apparently and treat them very badly. I don't doubt it goes in reverse too, whatever, I don't know. But the problem is, when you're in someone else's country, I imagine if we had a majority American city just across the border in Mexico, that we had given them, like I said, we gave them over LA or something, I don't think they'd want it. Not at this point. Oh, they would. It's a wealthy place. All right, now I got to look at this a little bit carefully. Okay, because it's like I said, it's not just Antiochus, and it's good to remember that. Now let's look at it. The real Antichrist. He do all these things, all of them, and not, because the idea of it waxed great even to the host of heaven. Is that really? Maybe aspirationally, Antiochus thought, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. So did Nebuchadnezzar. He actually burned the temple to the ground. And Antiochus defiled the temple. So what? He doesn't quite fit. He is like Antichrist, but he is not the fullness of this. I'm still not what to do about the host of the stars. Well, like I said, because what does that mean? If that's he hurt some of the holy angels? What does that mean? Because stamped on it, when you throw something down on the ground and you stamp on it, that sounds like contempt. There was war in heaven, and his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven and did cast them to the earth. It's still too hot. Wow. Yikes. This my new cup is great, but it keeps the coffee so hot that by the time I get to drink it, it kind of tastes old. Which is a good problem to have. I just got to cool it down faster. All right. And a host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression. It's an interesting sentence. By reason of transgression. So, these are things that are going to somewhat have to be seen. The sacrifice is meant to, the daily sacrifice of the Jews is, there would be daily sacrifices made at the temple. Every day. There's special high holy days, but there's daily sacrifices. Always daily sacrifices. Not like tons, but just something, right? And it's part of the Jews' ongoing worshiping of Yahweh. That's how they did it with the daily sacrifice. And so so he's given a host by reason of transgression. One of the things it says is that till the transgressors come to the full. I wonder if it has something to do with that. Because of the fullness of the transgression has come. The host is given him against the daily sacrifice. Meaning he's given a host, which is like an army. Or it doesn't have to be like an actual army, but it could just be an army of people who agree with or who are working in concert with together. If they're working with him together, they're a host. Because a host is a coherent unit of people. It's not a mob. A host is an ordered army. Of different, you can have the whole host of heaven. It's not necessarily indicating they all have swords and shields equipped, but it means that they are an organized group that is, able to act in concert together. That's what I mean. So, that's easy to understand. Because if the Jews, let's say at the end times, when we get to the end times, one of the things people expect is the Jews to rebuild the temple. They're definitely ready to. I don't know how they're going to pull it off. Okay, and here's the thing. If they do, it would, in the current situation, it would almost certainly be explosive. And so I can't imagine them doing it right now. But whenever they do it, it's probably going to be pretty explosive. And it'll be very easy to gather a lot of opinion against what they're doing there. And even call it a transgression. Because in a sense, the Jews, in order to restore the daily sacrifice, they have to do something against the Muslims, which is get rid of their Dome of the Rock or something. Because the Dome of the Rock is literally over where the Holy of Holies used to be. This is something the Muslims do in a lot of countries. In India, they went and they were like, where's the most important temple? Oh, there? They knock it down. They build theirs on top. That's what they do. It's, and it's not much different than what our culture does. Not mine, not the Christian American culture, but the new one, the urban, ungodly, unbelieving culture centered around the entertainment and this garbage they feed themselves with or whatever and making money and just materialist life. That one, what was I going to say about it? Oh, whatever. So by reason of transgression, it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Again, that's the horn. And so definitely Antiochus had a host and power over the sanctuary. And so he could take away the daily sacrifice, which he did. But it got restored again. And in the time of the Romans, you see them peacefully practicing their Judaism under the Romans, who accommodated them, made certain accommodations. The host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground. So there you go. When you cast down angels to the ground, how can it be good for them? In the sense of it's not good for them. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying when these angels are cast out with Satan, because it does say his angels were cast out with him. That could be a separate thing. That's all I'm thinking. Is the angels being cast out with him? Sounds like he isn't, if his tail drew a third of the stars and cast them to the earth, it sounds bad. And then here it says that definitively, and trampled on them. You know, it could be, like I said, I'm even as I listen, I'm like, I don't know how you make those stars good angels. In the war in heaven, the good angels won, and they throw out Satan and his angels. Satan doesn't get thrown out, and then as a last ditch, he pulls out a third of the angels and wounds them essentially, and does them some harm. Who are the angels that get harmed by all of Satan's actions? It's the ones who listen to him. So in a sense, it does say in Isaiah 14 something very interesting that I've always noted. Thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. Just like, look at Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine. He has destroyed his land and his people. And he also is an Antichrist-like figure, by the way. Very Antichrist-like. With his censoring churches. Another thing, with his cult of personality that he's cultivating, the way people are just adoring him and just, even celebrities just trying to elevate him to almost, like people are almost trying to help him get a God complex. You know what I mean? And a lot of people in power already have that problem. So it's not hard to see how an Antichrist-like figure can arise in a lot of places of power. That's why it gets dangerous. As powers start conflicting with powers and start amalgamating, becoming greater and greater, the stakes get high. In America, we used to have Democratic control, but now, like even in the primary, on the Democratic side, they don't want to have voting. They'll let them vote, but they don't really, they want to just pick the president now. We want the geriatric patient over here who can barely talk and walk. They want him because he's able to be controlled. They don't want a real people's president in there. And that's why, by the way, I'm really considering pulling a Democrat ballot and voting for RFK. Just especially in the primary. I don't know about the general election. Just because on our side, I don't think it's going to matter. I don't think we're going to give the nomination to some ghoul like Nikki Haley or, or one of these other warmongering monsters. I don't think we're going to give it to one of them. It's going to either be Trump or DeSantis. I hope one of those two, and I'd be pleased with either of those. But I want no Biden on that. I want to shut the other side out of the contest. Let them run a third party or something, get 20%. I don't know. I don't care. I want to shut them out. I want to shut their party out. I want them out of power. And I don't mean Democrats. I mean that branch which is doing what they're doing. Those people who are looting our country and enriching themselves and also exalting themselves perversely. And we have a very perverse president. Perverted. Absolutely disgusting human being. And his whole family is corrupt with him, obviously. They've shown that. If anything, I think that they should pardon the last president for his crimes and prosecute the current one. And then leave it there. Oh, whatever. Because I understand why they're mad at Trump. He took military plans. And they don't like that because that could get, that can be troublesome if the enemy finds your plans. Why are we planning war plans? He took war plans. We're planning for war. We're always planning for war. Did you realize that we have war plans on the table? And that almost like guarantees it happens, by the way. That's why, did everyone miss that Alex Jones predicted the war in Ukraine? He's like, we're going to have a war start here, in a couple of months here. Because they tell you what they're doing. They're too arrogant not to. They're like evil people literally in the movies, announcing what they're going to do before they do it. That's why when they tell you they're coming for your children, you should believe them. You should believe them. They're coming for our children. Good luck. My children are going to kick your ass, okay? Good luck. My children are going to kick your ass. Yeah, I said that. Right in the middle of the Bible study. I don't care. That's what I'm honest to God. I got my Lord. And that's not particularly, that's where profanity belongs. That's the kind of, I will smite you on your parts behind. He said it himself. It comes from it's a saying from the Bible. Kicking someone in their ass is something, God used to say, they use that word smite. We don't use it anymore, but it comes from the Bible. I will smite you on your parts behind. Or it doesn't say I will. He said he smote them on his parts behind. It means kicked, we use that same phrase. We just say kicked instead of smote. And instead of parts behind, we have a more colorful word. And that's right. You come for them, they're going to kick you right in the behind because you're going to be running. They'll send you packing. That's how I feel about it. That's why I said I've been ready my whole life for the war. But it's like you don't, like I said, it's like I'm not a big pass laws kind of guy. It's like this is a cultural war. When we win it by, what I am, I realized I am a farmer. I farm human beings. I'm a farmer of human beings. That's what I produce. There's a human farm I'm operating on here. Okay. So I want to get through this a little more. And it practiced and prospered. Casting down the truth to the ground. What could be more than saying, like, men aren't men and women aren't women? I mean, to literally say that a male is a woman and a female is a man. Or that's bad enough. But then to say there are other categories, like you could be non-binary. That's not true. So we're living in very perilous times because they match up a lot. When you see people just denying fundamental truth. This is, like I said, truth that you don't even need to read the Bible to know is wrong. You don't need to read a Bible to know it's wrong. You don't need to read a Bible to know that a man dressed up like a whorish woman is not a wholesome subject for children. When a guy dresses up like a whore, that's not for kids. You know what I mean? Any more than whores are for kids, or for godly people for that matter. Whores are for the ungodly and for those who go down to the pit. And dressing like one, just the same. Those who dress like whores and act like them will end up in the pit with Satan, in the fire that burns forever. And burns you out pretty quick, but at least that's what I believe. But the fire still burns. And we'll remember. Yep. I heard one saint speaking and another saint to that certain saint which spake. How long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden underfoot? So currently the problem is the Gentiles are treading the sanctuary underfoot. They are being, the Jews control all of Israel, but not the one most holy place of their whole religion. You know what I mean? And they can't even go back to Sinai because it's in Arabia. It's really difficult. It's always been difficult for the Jews. First they had to escape from Egypt. I mean, that was not they didn't have an army and chariots and stuff. You can't just leave if they don't want you to. That's a lot of times, in our country, we got a problem. People want to get in. That's good. It may change. In the future, people may be trying to get out. And that's why you don't want walls. It's not such a good idea. Monitoring, monitoring too. They can keep you in with that. Here's the thing. I want to protect our country and also protect our rights. So we don't need to worry about escaping our country. And so we can put up necessary defenses at the border to prevent, oodles of whoever from coming in. Then we won't have a country anymore. We're already losing it. They're trying to make us lose it because they think all these newcomers are going to become instant sort of urban. I don't want to. I try to avoid using the word leftist because I have too much respect for actual leftists to loop in these insane people, this insane mind virus, unenlightened. Like I said, there's nothing woke about it. It's completely unenlightened and anti-Christian. And that's why in the times we live, it's a very antichrist-like time, where we see things and people feel like it's more than it was in the past. I think because all the sins have gotten worse. Our government used to do things in secret. Now it does it in the open. And I don't know. But like I said, I don't say that to tell you that it means we're at the end. All that means is that it's a similar time. We could have we could have, like I've said before, we could have an Antiochus where it's something really bad going on, a lot like the Bible predicts. And that's the cool thing is that, like, you see how it predicted Antiochus. When the power and the holy and the unholy collide like that, that's what eventually like this movement, this unenlightened movement where it calls evil good and good evil, they're going to need a charismatic figure if this is going to be the end time. I don't buy it. I think too many regular people are not buying into it. But here's the problem. On some level, it won't matter. If regular people don't get a spine, like they didn't get a spine in the pandemic, there ain't nothing going to stop even a moderately antichrist-like figure from rising. Because just the way they went during the pandemic, they did what they were told, even when they knew even when they began to know. I know people who took the vaccine who didn't want to take the vaccine, but did it to keep their job. Coercion. That was if you took the vaccine to save your job, you are the victim of a war crime. You are. A crime against humanity has been committed against you because you were made against your will to participate in a medical experiment. You should be furious. Furious. I was beside myself with rage for most of the pandemic, and I still am to this day. I haven't gotten less angry in a good way. So, give not place to wrath. I express my anger through my music. It's very therapeutic for me, actually. Feels good. When I launched that COVID vaccine song, it made me feel really good inside. Finally I did something. Gotta do something about the war, too. I'm not sure what. Okay. How long should the vision be? Under 2,300 days. I don't know what much to say about that. We'll talk about it more, I guess, tomorrow. We'll pick up about verse 15. Because there's more. There's more to it. And by the way, saint, this means holy one. So it could refer to an angel. Or it could refer, he doesn't know where he is. He might refer, he knows these are holy ones. Remember that Jesus said, in the kingdom of God, that we would be equal to the angels as far as we wouldn't give or take in marriage. That all that's done with, And so it would be only natural for him not to be able to distinguish an angel from a quote unquote human saint. But anyways, so it's a holy one. That's what saint always translates as, actually. I think saint is some form of sanctified, which is what, what it basically means. So it's 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. It's always given out as that 3.5 year period with their minus 60 days. What does that mean? Well, we don't know. I've always figured that it meant that the tribulation, some people call it a 7-year tribulation. I think that there's some sort of split in the tribulation, and we'll talk about that here in Daniel. It's like like I said, some of this stuff is hard to understand. Like I said, the drawing those stars and then stamping on them, it's really hard to understand that. As far as those can't be good angels, because Satan doesn't beat the good angels, right? Michael and his angels fought against the dragon and prevailed. Does that mean that they lost a third of their forces in the war? I don't know. They lost, killed? I didn't think angels could get killed. That's another thing, Maybe something about this is he takes them from here. This is the last thing I say, because I like this. This makes sense to me, because I can reunify with my old view. He takes these angelic beings, and in seducing them into doing his will, Michael, the dragon and his angels fought. By fighting, he and them are brought down to the earth. And the stamping them into the earth signifies perhaps making them of the earth. Because they're being diminished by being brought to the ground, brought down to earth. They're no longer the holy angels anymore, but perhaps in so doing, Satan is portrayed always as this really ugly figure, like somehow the evil had done this to him. He didn't still possess his beauty, which I have no doubt he still does. But he's portrayed always as not always, but often as this hideous figure, right? That's the devil. Like I use it in my band. It's just some random demon face, but to me, like that's a comic version of the devil. I like these little overweight, and that's on purpose, well, and also I have no choice. That's me. But he's always portrayed that way because he is also this terrible beast. That is like his true nature. If his outside were to be made to look like his inside, he'd be red with fury and a monster with sharp fangs and horns. I mean, that's what he would be, like symbolically. And so when I see him casting them down, also when he draws them to earth and they are cast out, his actions also, in so doing, he tramples them into the earth and they become less. They are diminished, in some way, perhaps. That's a possible way to get that to flow in a little better with what we believe. Because otherwise it becomes a very sticky passage, it's like, and then I'm sort of like, I'm left wondering. And I'm always left a bit wondering about Antichrist because I don't know the exact nature. There's a lot because if you take here's the problem, because if you take the symbolism to the maximum, you might be you might be missing out on subtlety, because sometimes things are fulfilled subtly. You look at the way prophecy was fulfilled in the ministry of Christ, a lot of it is quite subtle. Like out of Egypt, I've called my son. No one really thought before Jesus that was a prophecy of Messiah. Even though, as the representative of the nation of Israel, as the core focus of all the promises of Abraham, that he is the one who brings that and makes it possible, what the Jews could not do, which was they failed. They couldn't be a blessing to everybody. They couldn't even be a blessing to themselves because they perished from the land. They did not obey God. They became an example of disobedience. They failed. But Christ came that they could succeed. And through him they will. Those who don't believe in him aren't going to succeed in doing what God said the mission of Abraham was. But those that believe will and are and do. So remember, I'll see you next time. And the spirit of... If you're going to have a tagline, you got to remember it. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Indeed. Should have my music ready right when I say that.
And I saw another